Hello and welcome everyone. Hi, it's Spiel time and we have decided to do some live panels and talks, and we are kicking this off today with a very special talk about how to conquer a writer's block. Like, what do you do if you want to start something, you have an idea, but you can't really get the creative juice flowing? So I have invited some very special guests for today from the Circle of Worldbuilders, which we are going to greet in a second here. But before we do so, if you have any questions, make sure that you post them with a big question in front of it, and I will try to catch them and we will answer them afterwards. So with no further ado, let's welcome our guests for tonight. Say hello to... Did I do it right? I did.
Hello.
Hi. I would say most people might know you, not everyone does. So maybe we will just go around and everyone introduce yourself quickly. Who wants to start?
Absolutely.
Well, one of us should start. I vote Guy.
But you've already started. Okay, yes. Hello, my name is Guy, and I'm from the YouTube channel How to Be a Great GM. And then it's someone else.
Hello, I'm Keora. I draw maps. I'm from the Keora place.
Erudite as always. We are Janet and Dimitris, and we are the couple behind World Anvil, the world building and campaign management and now novel writing software program.
That's Dimitris.
Yeah, I'm Janet. Good.
Hello, everyone. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Till. I'm the founder of Dungeon Fog, the map-making software where you can create stunning, beautiful battle maps. And again, the reason why we are here tonight is because we want to discuss how can you, or how does any one of you conquer that terrible situation where you sit in front of a blank sheet of paper and you try to figure out how to start and your mind goes blank. You're like, I have no idea how to get this going. And that can be pretty frustrating. I know that for myself. But the reason we brought all those beautiful guests here is because all of them have, I feel like, I'm assuming that you all had this experience, and everyone's coping differently with that, and maybe we can find some good advice for you how you can overcome this problem once it is hitting you in the face. So why don't we start with Keora? You're an artist. You're someone who sits in front, you start in front of a blank paper and you need to put something onto that paper. So what do you do when there's no creativity? What do you do to overcome any sort of writer's block for you?
Generally speaking, I'd probably just give up and go have a nap. This is an interesting one for me because I find myself struggling with this kind of thing a lot, and I think it's a lot of psychological stuff as well. Like, you need to be motivated, you need to be inspired, you need to be kind of like in the right frame of mind sometimes, and that kind of thing. I think for the most part for me, in order to be productive, in order to just get started on a project, you literally just have to trick yourself into working on something. So you can sort of say to yourself, oh, you know what, I've got to do this project and I really want to start it, I don't know where to go. Let's just work on it for 10 minutes and let's just start with something simple that I know how to do, and then we'll work out the rest of it later. So you work on it for a little bit. So when I'm drawing a map, I might do the coastline and say, all right, okay, well, we'll just start working out a shape. And almost, I would say, at least 90% of the time that works, and I suddenly get into it and I start working, and it goes perfectly fine. It doesn't always work, but that is one of the ways that I tend to deal with the freezing up of not being able to start on something.
When we started on the Assets for Deus, I remember that you send a lot of beautiful mood boards. Is that something that you usually do?
I do have a massive folder filled with about 6,000 images. that are categorized into different sort of things. So I like to work from a kind of a thematic environmental sort of viewpoint. So I have a folder for mountains. So loads of images of fantasy art for mountains. So that not only does that sometimes give me some inspiration about what kind of map I might want to make or what kind of mountains I might want to draw, but it also gives me a lot of color choices because I like to work from fantasy art to give me sort of color inspirations for color palettes to also sort of put onto my map. So yes, I do have like a lot of inspirational stuff for map making and doing sort of my artist stuff. But I find that most of the time actually looking at stuff when I've got a blank head, when I've got a block, doesn't really seem to push me past the actual block itself. I need to try the other trick, or I need to sort of, try something else, tidy up, or I need to go outside and sort of like shake, have a drink or whatever. Like I think that looking at inspiration alone is not the best way to get you past block.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we will unpack today a little bit what can cause such a block. So there might be several reasons why. Probably we will see. There are many possible reasons why you can suddenly run into such a blockade. But I know that another very talented group of guests here, World Anvil, you are dealing with a lot of writers. Like your software is specifically for game masters and writers, and I mean it is in the name of writer's block. So you for yourself worked out some very cool strategies to overcome that, right?
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
jump in just quickly? Sorry, just quickly. Tilla, can you boost the audio? Because people are saying the audio is a little bit soft.
Yes, I can.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Janet. Sorry.
Ultimate power. No, make us loud. I love it. So yeah, absolutely. No, it's something that happens. Like there's two characteristic types of creative blocks when you're dealing with world building or writing, or sort of campaign setting writing, I think. And the one is, oh my God, where do I start? And then the other one is, I've got to a point and I'm stuck. So those are kind of the two big places that you get either you're right at the beginning and you don't know what you want to start with, or you're partway through and you just feel jammed. You're at a fork in the road. You don't know which decision to make. You can't get your character out of the trap. You don't know what your players want, or whatever. So we have a method that we call Agile world building, and we won't go through the whole thing. But what is super useful for blocks, I would say, is the meta section, right?
Yeah, in many ways. Yeah, that's perfect. That's quite a good idea. So effectively, we know that people will get stuck. Eventually, we'll get stuck anyway. I mean, I get stuck all the time. It's not a big secret.
It's not an unusual thing,
yeah,
right? Exactly.
But what we found out from conversations we had with people all over is that most of the times when creative block occurs because you are losing your goal. You are losing essentially where is the point that you are trying to achieve. And our idea was, okay, look, in order for you to stop from having that block, you have to come back to your roots, trying to find out a way for you to re-examine what you were doing and why you were doing it, to get essentially reinvigorated in your search for the whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Because especially for world building, for us, world building is not something that will take you 2-3 hours or 2-3 days. World building can take several weeks, if not months, kind of thing.
It's not a single project like a map that when it's done, it's done. It's a process that goes on and usually becomes then the setting for various campaigns or various novels or both. We see that a lot.
Absolutely. But I think, as Mark said before, creative block in general is something that it can only be unstuck. Like, so you can get out of it if you just work. And it's as simple as that, as it's not. You have to put your brain into motion, essentially. It's like a locomotive, right? Yeah. It's very hard for you to start getting going, but once you're going, there is going to be inertia that will actually push you through.
Absolutely. So when we talk about agile world building, this is actually a section that will come out on World Anvil as early as tomorrow. It's currently with our beta testers. And essentially what we do is we encourage you to think about why you're building the world and what genres you're tapping into in your world setting And then we encourage you to sort of expound upon that, to bring in various sort of current affairs. We call them drama, but basically it's current affairs. It's like stuff that is happening in your world. Now, the reason that we do this, and there are other questions in there as well, and you just need to give short, concise answers. This is not write the whole Silmarillion. This is just a few sort of touch points for your world. The thing is that you can go back to these whenever you have a problem. So if you have a problem, okay, where do I want my players to go next? I have a new adventure I want to do, or I want to write a new book. Then you go back and touch in, okay, well, what was my motivation? I wanted to create a world full of wonder, or I wanted to scare the living crap out of my players.
That's my scenario.
That's always your scenario. Yeah, exactly.
You said an interesting...
So touching into your motivation is a really good way to decide where you're going next. Ditto touching into things like your genre. Okay, well, I need to solve this problem. Oh yeah, my genre was steampunk. Is there a steampunk solution to this problem? Or my genre was sci-fi. Is there a sci-fi solution to this problem? Or again, when you're talking about current affairs, is there a current affair item that I can extrapolate from
It can be weaved into
that can be weaved into this, that can either provide a new thread or a new subplot or a new place to go or a new quest that will keep my players entertained, but then you're always pulling on the same matrix of the world, so it never feels like you're just pulling out disconnected things, or if you'll excuse the language, you're just pulling it out of your ass, right? It's always coming from a bigger plan, which is great. So it all feels like everything basically belongs together, but it's a starting point for that creativity.
Yeah, I think you said something very interesting, because it's motivation, and not the personal motivation, but the motivation of the thing that you want to do. Like, what is the motivation behind whatever I am doing? I think is a very good drive, because you usually start to think of something often from a very big perspective, where you feel like I need to have the final world ready, and that kind of blocks you. Now, when you just start thinking about motivation, you kind of have a very easy touch point to get started. And to bring Guy into the conversation here, he's an expert on game mastering. If you're writing your adventures, if you're writing a one-shot, small campaign, I feel like watching your videos, motivation is a very strong input, right? That is also something that drives you quite a lot.
Yes, motivation for sure. But I think you can have lots of motivation. You just don't know where to go sometimes. Like, I really want to make a great adventure, but I'm not entirely sure what happens next. Or I want to, I want to scare my players, but and for me, I have two little things that I need to use. And I was using one this afternoon, as a matter of fact. I'm busy designing an adventure, and I needed a map. So I went, right, I need a map of a castle. Okay, right, where do I start? What do I do? It's a castle. Right, good. And I was stuck. I was literally stuck. It's like, why? I have an internet worth of castles. I visited a castle over the weekend. It shouldn't be difficult, but I was still stuck. I just got a block and it was just staring. And so I fall back on two things. Firstly, if I don't know where I'm going, or if I know where I'm going, but I don't know what needs to be done, I then fall back on the practicals. And I go, okay, practically, what does a castle need? Well, it needs towers. Okay, plop down some towers, or describe the tower, or fill the tower with monsters. Okay, cool. Then it needs a keep, and then it needs a kitchen, and then it needs a this, and it needs a that. And you just kind of throw down everything that has to be there because that's what we expect to be there, all the practical stuff. So when you're writing an adventure, it's like, well, what do we need? We need a beginning. We have to start somewhere. So practically, we start on the same planet that the adventure's on, if it's not science fiction, right? So once I've done the practicals, then often in doing the practicals, you go, well, there's a gap here, or I was writing down about the kitchen, but what's the food that they serve in that kitchen? What food gets eaten in the region? And then suddenly off you go on these creative tangents where your block is now gone, because you're no longer focused on making a castle. Now you're focused on something that your brain wasn't even worried about before. Yeah. So it gets unlocked, and it kind of then wanders off in that direction. And so that's the one process that I use is okay, what practically has to be there.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, That is very comparable to what Keora just said before, because you said sometimes you're blocked and then you just start with the coastline. So you're trying to get away from the big picture and into a smaller box that is easier to solve, right? And that's the same thing that what Anvil said, where it says think of small blocks and get them done instead of trying to fulfill the whole picture, right?
You're absolutely right.
Basically the same thing that I do when I need to draw a map and I realize that, like, in my head I already know this beautiful giant map that it's going to be at the end, but then I have no idea how to start. And the best way is to just do rooms, right? Just start with the room layout, 1 or 2 rooms, and then see where it's going. Yes, Dimi?
I would like to say that it is really beautiful to find creativity and find inspiration through an organic process, but sometimes you have really to take a step back, and before you start doing that, at least sit down and consider what are you aiming to do, because the problem with actually growing organically is at some point, A, you might go to a tangent that is completely out of where you were supposed to be going, and B, that you'll find yourself that you actually put yourself in a corner, because essentially you start doing a map and then you say, oh, actually, this map was supposed to be 50 by 50 and now I have spent 25 or 2 by 25 in something I don't even need, then you're kind of lost. So I think there is a little bit of a secret recipe there in terms of, like, yes, go ahead, create and explore and finding, but don't over expand in development. In agile development, in fact, we have a rule that says that your experiments should be as much controlled as possible. So experiment small and experiment a lot, and then from those experiments, take the ones that are successful and continue working, kind of thing. So don't go essentially. It's something actually Keora taught me. Keora taught me a long time ago that you should never start building the map of your world.
Yeah.
It is a horrible idea. And that's actually the same thing idea. Is that start with a small region, start with a city kind of thing, start with something smaller, and you can always go bigger later on, right?
Yeah. Okay, can
Yeah,
you?
I always recommend that when.
Go on. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you to explain that.
So yeah, well, it's a concept that I like to tell people whenever they tell me, where do I start map making? And it's less to do with motivation and more about the question of agile world building, about where do you start, which is related, definitely, but it's like, you know, you just don't know what you're doing, and you kind of have an overwhelming amount of information or an overwhelming idea that you just want to go, I want to do all of it, but you don't know where to just get started, you know, where to, like, actually zoom in and actually start writing or start map making or whatever it is. And I always tell people that if you have no pre-existing sort of map making skill or writing skill, whatever, you start small and you do lots of them. You start small with a small map and you draw loads of little maps, and then eventually you get to a point where you've learned about how you draw a mountain, you've learned how to draw a coastline, you've learned how to draw a tree, and therefore the map after your first one will be slightly better because you'll already have filled those out. And the same process can be said for writing. So you can write a very small short story, or you can write a small self-contained little one shot or on one piece of paper, and the next adventure will be better because you'll have learned about all of these different things that you need. Sometimes almost everybody who does creative stuff in D&D and map making and writing and all of that stuff they all have you have so many ideas. You just overwhelmingly like, oh, cool, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do a pirate thing and I want to do a jungle thing and I want to do all of these things. But you have that overwhelming amount of ideas, but you then don't know how to get down and actually start doing them. So you need to start out small. And I think that's something that I say to people over and over and over again.
Yeah.
If I can jump in there quickly, I think what's also important to realize is that even when you've done, it's a funny kind of curve, because yes, the more you practice, the easier it does become. And if you've got a system in place where you're using agile building and you're kind of constraining yourself to your original goal, while sort of exploring tangents and things, you get to a point where you're like, okay, cool, I know how to do this. But then you get to the point, which I'm certainly at, when I'm going, I have to make another castle map. I've drawn hundreds of castle maps. How do I make this one different from the 50 that I've already created? And so you get a new level of block where it's like, well, I could just follow the standard layout, but then it becomes, it's no longer a challenge. It's no longer a creative process. And it's really just a, yeah, all right, fine. Well, we can play with the interior decor, or we could, you're starting to do nuanced kind of stuff. So,
you know that you could go
yeah, that for me
into the
is
public
big.
library and just look what castles others have done, right?
Well, yes.
Sorry.
No,
Dina.
absolutely. But I think in all creative pursuits, you're going to end up where you're going, oh, well, I did that adventure, and I want to do it somehow different. And so then you need to look to different places and things.
So what I would say is absolutely, but then there's also that moment where you're like, okay, well, I've created 10 castles that are all like this, or that I've created 10 castles that are within the world and they're all a little bit different. So what I would then advise is go back to your motivation sheet, go back to your setting the scene sheet and say, how can I take the original inspiration into a different direction? So you go back to those first principles and you say, okay, well, I've said fantasy and we've done all of these fantasy castles. What if we say, okay, fantasy castle, but it's not made of stone? It's made of some kind of crystal. It's a fantasy castle. We can do that. It's made of the bodies of my enemies. It's a fantasy castle. We can do that. It's carved downwards into the rock. It's a fantasy castle. We can do that. It's underneath the sea. And so you go back to that original inspiration and you say, I've done fantasy castle. How do I reinterpret fantasy castle? And literally you can just brainstorm a few crazy ideas and say, which crazy idea do I like?
I have two things to say on that. First of all, I would like to say that it's very important that when Guy was creating his castle, he created the towers, and he created the keep, and he created the kitchen. And he was very adamant about the kitchen. It's a very interesting telltale to your character and the importance you put to the kitchen of the castle.
Yes.
Secondly, I would like to say that a castle will always be a castle because it is a generic concept, okay? And that is the problem with many people. Like we see fantasy and we think that everybody has the same thing, the same thoughts about what fantasy is or what a castle is. The truth of the matter is that yes, things like castles always have walls, towers, keep, yeah, that's fine. But to go back to what you said, Guy, before, the area around the castle and what happens around the castle or the people in the castle is what makes a difference. So the castle is not the walls. The castle is the story that in fact gave essentially different tabards to the castle or different wall paintings to the castle or effectively the history of the crack on the wall kind of thing. So all of those are details that can actually come from the outside in, like from that exploration you've done into the castle to make it unique in many ways.
I think Kiara wanted to add something.
I did. I wanted to talk about something which is something that I just thought of that is something that possibly we've not talked about quite as much as I would have liked to at the beginning, which is that we're all really experienced with this kind of thing. I think all of us have been doing this kind of thing for quite a long time. And one of the things that probably connects all of our knowledge together is the fact that we have a lot of knowledge in the sense that Guy has been to a lot of castles. He's done castles before, you know. Guy's written adventures. He's written campaigns. He's run campaigns so many times. I've drawn tons of maps. Janet and Dimmy do world building all of the time. But one of the reasons why that we do that is because, well, not why we do it, but we've also collected information. We've collected all of this stuff together. And it's not just about information and it's not just about inspiration, sorry. It's about we're interested in these subjects and therefore we want to try and put them into our worlds. And I think that if you find yourself being stuck about writing in a fantasy world, then go read a fantasy book or go read another fantasy setting and find that little bit that interests you. Collect more information. You might actually just go off and watch a documentary about something that is just really interesting. And that might then lead you to soak up that and put that into your world. Because
in fact, on the thing that we're building right now, the meta section, the last part is called inspiration, and it has 5 sections, which are TV and movies, music, art, and what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting something. But essentially, the idea is that exactly that. These sections are there for you to collect those things slowly over time to create essentially a mood board for your world that will actually be able to go back to and see it and, you know, get inspired, get essentially reinvigorated.
Yeah. But again, like that research section is so important. Like, go read about our world and all the weird crap that exists in it, and something will trigger, and you'll be like, oh my god, I need to write about the Dumbo octopus, but it's massive and it lives in the moat in the castle.
I think I can connect very much to what Keora said, because for almost 4 years before I started writing my own stories and my own maps and my own campaigns, I was just playing on regular preset books, campaign books. I was playing Curse of Strahd and I was playing Tomb of Annihilations because I didn't feel confident enough to really get a good structure and a good adventure out just on my own. And only over the course of just playing for almost 6 years now in preset campaigns, and that they were getting boring to some extent, I started to kind of feel my way around, what if I do it differently than the book says? What if I add this little story here that wasn't in there? And then it's a natural process where you then slowly grow into experimenting. That's what you just said before. And like having contained experiments where you say, oh, I'm doing a one shot here, I'm adding a small story there, which helps to get the confidence to say, okay, I can do this. My players like this.
I think that's worth bearing in mind as well, which is pretty much exactly what you said, but I'll say it in a more sort of succinct way, is that let it grow organically. Don't beat yourself up if you can't manage to actually overcome a block.
Yeah.
Go
absolutely.
off, do something else, even if it's, doing something completely unrelated, because I think this kind of stuff does grow very slowly.
Yes.
You do learn and you do experience, and you get more experience, and you slowly will build up your world, your book, your map over time. It doesn't have to be done like that. I mean, I think everybody here, though, has had to deal with deadlines for finishing a creative project. I think that sometimes can be very useful. I don't think it necessarily creates your best work, but it can be very useful to finish something or to get something done. But I think that overall, the process of just organically growing your library is what you should also bear in mind and breathe and let it just,
If we talk about deadlines, I mean, the one thing that we all experience almost, let's say, every week, every month, is when you're trying to finish the prep for your next game, and the game is only 2 days away, and you're like, I didn't start in time. So I did it myself quite a lot, where I said, I would love to have a good map for my players, but I'm sure I can't make it in time. Where I went to the Dungeon Fog library and I just looked for the maps that the others did, like the community, and I just took a community map. And I've seen quite a few maps that were kind of already almost perfect, where I just needed to tweak some tiny details to make it fit my game, which is awesome because I've literally learned so many new techniques from just taking what the community has made and adapting it to the maps I need. So this is, I mean, we're all calling it getting inspired, right? That's what a lot of game masters do. They go out, look around, search the internet, and look for inspiration. And that kind of builds to the experience level you have.
I think that I have found myself a lot of times going to Dungeon Fog to get inspired, or to in fact find copies like of maps from my games, or in fact I have pulled some of Keora's maps from his website and was like, dear God, I needed like a quick location there for a mountain or a jungle and have no time to do it. It's perfectly normal to do it, and yes, Dungeon Fog makes it very easy, in fact, because I can plop things in there and make it actually my own if I wanted to. But I would like to say also that, and that is quite important in terms of not getting stuck and doing small experiments, that in many cases, communities of people like the one we have built for ourselves, or the communities in Discord, can be an extreme help as well. So you should not be afraid to go to guys or Keora's or Dungeon, or even World Builders. They say, guys, I'm stuck. Where do I go from here? And that's why we're building those, because we're bringing people together that can help you out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I get pings in the Discord all the time from, if you follow the perm @Game Master, and I'm sure everybody here has a Discord with a perm like this. if you have that role, people will ping you and they'll say, I have a 20th level party and I'm doing X and I need some help because I don't want to railroad them, but also they're 20th level, so help. And these kinds of questions, we all run into these. And honestly, like, as thinking, active, excited game masters, we love troubleshooting problems with other people because it helps us solve our own problems as well. So absolutely hop in these communities, ask for people's advice. The worst that you'll get is lots of opinions, which is great, because then you can have a think and sift through and see what might work for your group, for your campaign, and for your players, right?
Absolutely. Something that I've found works quite well as well when you're looking at community, especially with how easily it is to connect with people. Because our Discords are huge in terms of community, and there are hundreds of Discords out there. And it's not just Discord, there's Facebook, and there's all that kind of wonderful stuff. Something that I do, and often this kind of comes back to your deadlines as well, Kaora, but if there's something that I don't really want to do, if it's like, I've got to go and sort out I've got to write 1,000 words or 2,000, whatever your standard measurement would be, is I have a couple of friends that we don't game together, but I'll say, all right, I'm going to put aside an hour now or in 10 minutes to do this. And then everybody puts aside an hour at the same time. And you say, right, everyone ready to do whatever it is that you need to do? Yes. Okay. And go. And then you hyper focus for that hour. And then at the end of it, you're like, okay, I'm done. And it's actually quite amazing where you know that your mates are struggling and going through stuff and doing stuff, and you know that you're doing it as well. And there's a support that comes through. And I find that very useful as well it's like
it's like a self-set deadline that
yes
motivates your own brain to fire, because you're saying to yourself, go and do it, because you've got to do it for this deadline, and it suddenly is able to make those connections that it might not be able to normally.
So in writing, we call this a writing sprint, where literally you set a timer, whatever it is, and you sit down and work for that period of time, knowing that that period will end, which gives you two things. A, it gives you an out. So if you're sitting there and you're like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. Oh, there's only 12 minutes left. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. But it's ending in 12 minutes, you're fine.
yes
But it also, it gives you that crunch time, which means you have to do it. It is that self-imposed deadline. And again, a lot of the World Anvil streamers are now streaming with writing sprints of various different lengths. So there's a lot of people streaming these kinds of sort of sit-ins and work-togethers and stuff as well. So if you don't have friends that you can do it this with, if you don't have other GMs or other people working in this kind of creative space, hop on, check out the Anvil streaming network. No, it's not called that. It's called the
ASC.
The ASC, thank you. And there's 40, I think, streamers now who all do lots of these kinds of write-in streams where you can just literally hop in the chat, they play music, and you work together.
In effect, literally, they have so many streamers that they double book in time because they cover all 24/7 hours of the day throughout the day.
So there's always somebody awake when you're awake who's doing writing sprints
exactly.
and working.
The good thing about all those self-imposed deadlines is that they are self-imposed, which means I quite a few times I ran into the thing where I started too late, and I was putting that deadline on myself, and I was like, I need to get this finished. And by the time I got the creative juice flowing, I realized that this map is going to be legendary if I finish it. So what I did is I derailed my party, sent them somewhere else just to give me another week of time to finish this map. But at that point, I was so inspired by the whole map that I said, no. If I bring that to my players, I make it perfect. And that's a good thing, because if it's not a business deadline where you can't just go off rails, if it's a self-imposed deadline, it's something that you do to yourself, but you can work with it afterwards.
When I was working on the Blood Grotto, I worked on it for a month to finish a mini setting and publish it. And I didn't have anybody telling me to do it. It wasn't supposed to be it wasn't a commission or anything. I just wanted to do it for my own creative purposes, I guess. But doing that meant that I started ordering artwork and setting deadlines to print and talking to writers, and it kind of all came together to finish in a very tight sort of schedule. So I think working to that kind of self-imposed thing can work really, really well.
By the way, if you don't know what that is, I think you have it on your website, right?
Yes.
Check it out. This is by far I feel like one of the most beautiful mini campaigns I've ever seen. Like mini setting, it's impressive. It's absolutely. I had it in my hands. You gave it to me on Dragon Meat, and I was like, I will never let you go anymore.
Yeah, well, that was really a really lovely experience, but I'll never do it again because it was terrible.
We'll do it together.
Well, I should give myself more time. It just really burnt me out. But it was a really good experience to learn from, and I learned so many different things. And it was a really amazing sort of, it did turn out wonderfully at the end. But it was something that really burns you out if you really try and struggle with that kind of thing. And the thing about deadlines is that I mentioned this before, is that if you're working professionally, which obviously all of us have at one time or the other, to make something for a company or for an individual for some sort of hard deadline, yes, that does get you to work. It just does. It might mean that you sometimes sacrifice making it perfect, but perfect can be the enemy of good. Because just being able to write and do these kinds of things and not, I mean, Janet was probably going to start talking about this instantly, but if you keep trying to rewrite and make something perfect, and you're working on this world, and you go, oh, I'm going to spend the next 20 years writing this setting. You carry on, Janet. You're gonna finish this sentence.
No, I was just going to talk about MVP, not most valuable player, minimum viable product. So this is something that is I've heard Dimitris talk about for the last 10 years. Way before we had World Anvil, he would talk about minimum viable product with regard to websites or, all sorts of things. What do I need to make this work? It's what Guy was saying earlier. What is the minimum I need to make this session happen? What is the minimum I need on this map? What is the minimum I need in this world so my players can just walk around and do the session, right? Like, we're not worrying about next week right now. We are thinking about, I have a session in 12 hours. I have done no work for it. What is the minimum viable product?
Yeah, MVP in many ways, in fact, is a self-imposed deadline, because it challenges you to ask yourself, does what I have created so far cover what I was trying to achieve in the beginning? And if the answer is yes, the chances are you should stop working, because as creative people, we always tend to want to overachieve, and without even realizing. And to go another thing that actually is very important for everybody to know, the 90-10 rule. The idea that 90% of the things take 10% of the time, and the rest 10% will take 90% of the time. So be careful when you're crossing this line. And the only thing to make sure that you're crossing this line or not is to ask yourself, am I fulfilling what I was trying to achieve to begin with?
Yeah. So it goes back to that motivation. And I think with game masters, often we have anxiety. I say this as a less experienced game master. We have anxiety, and so we want to over-prepare. And remembering the minimum viable product means that A, we don't over-prepare, but B, we don't railroad. So it's easy to prepare so much that you actually start to railroad, and that then knocks onto the creativity of your players, right? You don't let them go around to do things because you've prepared it, so gosh darn it, they're gonna go see it.
I don't think you're gonna be railroading them necessarily, but you become definitely more precious about what you've done. Isn't that right, Guy? Is that like something you agree with this?
Yeah, well, because you've invested so much time and effort, you want to see it come to fruition. And if we're talking role playing, it's a collective narrative. It's not just your narrative, and you have to remember that. I think something to add to this whole idea of doing stuff is that's also something that's very important in overcoming writer's block or creative block. You can't overcome it if you don't have anything to work with. So even if you do start drawing your coastline, or you do start writing your article or drawing out your map, if you just sit there going and dismissing idea after idea after idea because it's not good enough or because it's not going to hit your goals and things, that's not going to work for you. You're going to end up with nothing. Whereas at least if you go, okay, well, I'm stuck and I've tried the practical thing and I've tried the this and I've tried the that. If you just do something, even though it's bad, as Janet was saying, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, but at least at the end of that hour, Janet has something that she can look at and go, yes, I really hate that. However, I can now go back and go, well, I hate this because it's not original.
Yeah.
So how do I make it original? So then you have something from which to then work. So that I think is something that's very, very important. Is you can't fix something that doesn't exist. That's that way.
Here's an interesting story to that. Today I had to cut the very special video that we're going to show on Sunday, and I had to cut that, and I hated it. I hate cutting. I hate it to the deepest depths of my soul. And I know that Guy is really good at it. So it was so tempting to just write Guy and say, hey, can you cut this for me, please? But I said, nope, I'm going to do it. And it was terrible until I started to just drag all the clips into the timeline and just look at them. And it probably took 3 or 4 attempts to cut it in a way that I liked it. But the second I started to drag in there was this break point where I was doing nothing, and I was really kind of resistant of doing something. And the second I broke this point by dragging the timeline, like dragging the clips into the timeline, kind of made it work, because then I had something in there and I kind of forced myself, or it wasn't even forcing then. It was just playing around with it. So as Janet said, if you're writing something and you're hating it, that's fine. But that is one thing that you've ruled out, where you say, okay, I don't like that one. At least I have one thing off the list that I will not do, and that might spark another idea.
I have to say, when you sent me that file, I thought someone professional had put that clip together. I was like, oh, I wonder who he sent this to. Why didn't he send it to me? I could have done it for him. But whoever did it did a really great job. So I'm super excited for it. When is it coming out? Sunday?
Sunday, yes. It's going to be on Sunday.
Fancy.
Now I'm curious, honestly.
Yeah. Come and check it out. Another thing I wanted to say, because I saw that the chat was discussing that quite a bit, is I feel like even if you're putting self-imposed deadlines on yourself, you need to know how you function. Like, it doesn't make sense to put a deadline on yourself 2 weeks before the thing happens, when you know that you are a person that starts last minute. Like, if you know that the next game is on a Friday, it wouldn't work for me if I sit down on Sunday and say, now I have to, because I'm self-imposing this deadline on me. I should go for Wednesday or Thursday in that case, because that is when when the pressure kicks in. That's when I start to get creative. I see objections here. Dimi.
I definitely have an objection on
Yeah,
that.
go.
I am the kind of person who I always set my deadlines at least a week before they're supposed to be, if I have the time, because I know things will go wrong anyway. So at least I can make them feel better before the deadline actually hits. And secondly, sorry, Kara, actually, I'll leave it to you, but I think that deadlines are a good thing, but they're not supposed to be there to stress you. They're there to control you. And if you can, and you do have the time, you should not actually go to the edge. But that's just me. That's how I go.
Kiara?
I just want to talk about this as well, which is that we're all offering you advice, and we all have very different experiences and different ways of dealing with this. When we talk about the community, if you go and talk to me in my Discord, or if you go and talk to Guy in his Discord, if you go and talk to Janet and Dimmy in their Discord, or Till in his Discord, I think if you ask the same question to everybody, we might give you the same advice, but probably we're going to give you different advice. And I think that's going to come down to who we are as creators and how we've dealt with it.
And who they are as well.
And who we are. But also, you've got to remember that it's going to change depending on who you are as well, and who you are as an individual, and how you are able to deal with these different kinds of situations. So take different bits of advice and try and make them work for you. because you might not find that working to deadlines is any way beneficial to your workflow. You might think that that's terrible. You might go, oh, this just isn't working. I can't do it. I'm stressed. I'm anxious. I feel all like hung up. I can't do it. Or it might be great for you. You know, so that's definitely worth bearing in mind if you're listening to us talking and going, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe it won't work. Maybe it will. I hope it does. But yeah, just bear that in mind as well.
Janet?
Yeah, I just wanted to add another tool to the toolbox. We've been talking about deadlines, which is great, but there's nothing worse than having an impending deadline that you can literally do nothing about because you have not set time in your calendar to work on your shit. That is the worst thing in the world. So one of the things that a lot of novel writers do, but I think probably a lot of DMs do it, is they have, this is preparation time or this is creative time. And I know previously I was a musician. I would literally create appointments with myself in my calendar, which were work time or practice time or doing stuff time. It's not magic. It won't happen unless you sit down and do it. So creating time within your schedule that you will be able to actually, put your ass in the seat and do the work is really important. And again, different people work best at different times of day. Everybody's got their own schedule. There are a lot of studies that suggest if you sit down in the same time, in the same place, it is very beneficial from a sort of learning perspective and from a sort of creative inflow perspective. Like you'll find your flow quicker.
It's
if you
work conditioning.
Basically, yes. Even to the point that if you're drinking the same drink or eating the same snacks every time, that will also put you into this sort of creative space and help you get into your creative flow. So experiment with making appointments with yourself. This is always advice that I give to anybody who says they have creative blocks. Make sure you are actually sitting in the chair and setting yourself up to do the work, and experiment with different parts of your schedule, different times, different spaces, and see what triggers creativity for you.
And be disciplined about what you do in that time as well, because I know I do exactly that. My most creative time is probably somewhere between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. After that, it's just downhill. That's when, if I'm going to do writing or if I'm going to do creating something specific, that's exactly, I will make a time to wake up an hour earlier so that I'm showered. It's not I wake up and go through the routine and then sort of work for 10 minutes. It's no. That's my time. You don't Facebook, you don't check anything, you don't email anything. You sit down to do what you intended to do. Just sort of stick to that.
Kara?
When I said discipline, I immediately thought of all the times I've tried to look for artwork and then spent I get lost in ArtStation or Pinterest, and I was suddenly going down the rabbit hole, and it's like, you've got to try and resist that urge.
I have a fix for that. It's called the Wikipedia dive. Basically, whenever you go and look for resource material, you set a freaking timer.
Yeah.
You give yourself 10 minutes or 25 minutes if it's research and you're reading articles and stuff. Because the number of times that I have opened Wikipedia and it's 3 hours later and I know how to make a bomb, but I still don't know how to fix the problem in my story that I was looking up in the first place.
But yeah, that's
I got to bombed via the Aztecs, via Mesopotamia, and I don't know how I got there, but I've lost 3 hours of writing time. Oh my God, set a timer, people. Don't go in without a timer or you'll never come out.
A timer you listen to, or actually will turn off your computer or not turn off, which is dangerous, but definitely something you will listen to, kind of like,
It all goes back to the knowledge thing as well. Like, you're absorbing all this knowledge, but if you know that you need to be doing something or you want to get something done, you do need to remember that it is a rabbit hole, and you do need to,
and that goes back to going back to what we were saying before about setting a goal and knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Yes, you're going to be researching, but you're doing it to finish the damn adventure. If you spend 3 hours on researching, you haven't finished the damn adventure.
True.
Exactly. I think I ended up on Mongolian throat singing rock bands once.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
We did that yesterday in the session. Exactly that.
Mongolian throat
That
singing.
might be a life checkpoint. So yeah, we were there yesterday when we were making characters. We somehow got to 2V and throat singing.
Apparently it's a thing. Maybe there's like this study we should do. It's like where you end up in the rabbit hole. Either it's explosives, or it's weird deaths,
Or
it's
Hitler.
Mongolian throat singing.
There's a rule on the internet for that, where every conversation.
There must be.
Guys,
Anyway, sorry,
since
Till.
yeah, no, it's fine. I think we could go on and on about that, but we're closing. We're getting close to the closing time. So I would like to do a quick summary here, if we can find probably some points where because the whole conversation showed that we're different people, we have different approaches, and still I was trying to keep track of who's saying what. And there are a lot of things that everyone said, which is, for example, try to find the right time when you want to do prep, pre-schedule it. So do yourself, either it's a self-imposed appointment you do with yourself or a self-imposed deadline, but find a time that fits your creative space, and be at least so disciplined about that you use that time. Don't go overboard, like do baby steps, and try to make small steps towards the goal that you want to achieve. Think about motivation. I think I've heard from everyone, and not the personal motivation. I think we're all talking about what is the goal I want to achieve? What is the motivation of that map? Or what is the motivation of that article?
Yeah.
Or that
Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. And then don't try to finish it all in one. Just do small experiments, get closer to it with every iteration. Don't be afraid to do something terrible, because that will help. You can throw it away, but you've learned something from that, and you can continue on that. Did I miss something?
No, but I had to add something, because you said something that triggered a memory, which is very important. Something you learn in martial arts is that from training session to training session, you learn more things subconsciously than you think that you do. So you do need to start and stop and start again later on, because in the meantime, your brain in fact does things that you don't realize
It's
it's trying.
processing information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So give yourself the time as well to take the break in between, because that will in fact infuse you with more ideas.
Yeah, having a break is critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Lara Liepin said in the chat, make sure that you are drinking water during this time. Make sure you're feeding your brain.
Imposter.
Because there's nothing worse than actually realizing, guy downing his coffee there, actually realizing that you've starved your brain and therefore you cannot think. Set yourself up to succeed, basically. And that's what all of this is about.
Yes. Any last words, Guy?
No, I think you did a very good summary. And when in doubt, stick a giant banana in it.
Yeah.
Or to
okay.
the community. That's the other thing about.
Yeah, talk to people. I think that's also very good advice. Like I'm constantly looking for sparring partners when I have ideas, when I'm not sure, when I kind of still need to find the right way around.
I got mine here.
Perfect. So guys,
Everybody needs to find their Janet.
everybody needs to find his Janet.
Find your own Janet.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. Keora, thank you for sharing all your experience with map making and writer's blocks. Guy, thank you as always for being here. It was a pleasure that I can be the moderator for you today. It's the first time. So thank you. Thank you for the patience with me. Dimi, Janet, as always, thank you for having you here and for your great advice. Guys, if you want to see more Dungeon Fog streams, there's another one coming up in about an hour. I will have Martin Hughes with me, and we will be talking about how to get your first publishing project kicked off. Like what can you do if you have a great idea, you want to get it published? How can you start that? How can you go about that? So if you want to see that, join us in an hour. Until then, I say thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much to all of you for sticking around and chatting with us. And see you soon, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.